The sun hovered low over the Arizona horizon, casting long shadows across the dusty trading outpost of Red Bluff. Wagons creaked, oxen groaned, and travelers milled about preparing for the long journey toward the New Mexico territory. But beneath all the noise, one name drifted from voice to voice like a rumor, carried on the wind. Tako. Some said he was once the fiercest scout the Apache Nation had ever known. Others claimed he'd survived ambush no man should walk away from. And then there were those who lowered their voices further, smirking as they whispered, "He's too old for this now." The man himself stood near the outskirts of camp, tightening the strap on his worn saddle. His hair, once black as obsidian, now bore threads of silver that glinted in the sunlight. His face carried deep lines, not of fragility, but of years carved by wind, war, and wisdom. His eyes, however, were unchanged, sharp, steady, unreadable. Most kept their distance from him, partly from respect and partly from uncertainty. He was a living contradiction, quiet, almost solemn, yet radiating a presence that made even young soldiers step aside. The Army commander, Captain Bryce, approached him with a rolled map tucked beneath his arm. "Tako," he said, "you'll guide the caravan until it reaches the Santa Fe Trail. We've had trouble with floods and—" "I know," Tako answered, his voice low and even. "Storms came early this year." Bryce nodded, accustomed to how Tako always seemed to know things before anyone else did. "Just keep them safe. Some of these folks are new to the frontier." Tako glanced at the bustling wagons, noting the mixture of excitement, fear, and inexperience etched on the travelers' faces. Then his eyes stopped on one woman. Eliza Carter. She stood near her wagon, sleeves rolled up as she hammered a loose board into place. Her movements were quick, efficient, stubbornly determined. Her blonde hair, tied back with ribbon, escaped in rebellious strands that framed her face. She looked too young to be a widow, but the black band on her sleeve told the truth. Eliza caught Tako watching her, lifted her chin, and gave him a look that was neither shy nor grateful, just assessing. As if she were judging a piece of equipment she wasn't sure she trusted. When the caravan finally set off, creaking along the rocky trails, Tako rode at the front. He didn't talk much, but his presence alone created a sense of order. Travelers watched him scan the sky, feel the wind, and study the ground as if reading words only he could see. By midday, the group reached a fork in the road. The path to the right was clear, smooth, and commonly traveled. The path to the left led through narrow canyon brush that wagons rarely used. Tako raised his hand. "We go left." The settlers exchanged uneasy glances. Captain Bryce had already ridden ahead to check on another patrol team, leaving Tako solely in charge. Murmurs rose like buzzing insects. "That canyon looks tight. Why not the main trail? It'll slow us down." And then came Eliza's voice, sharp, ringing, impossible to ignore. "Why are you leading us through that?" she demanded, urging her horse forward until she drew even with him. "The main road is perfectly fine. Everyone knows that." Tako didn't turn to look at her. He kept his gaze on the distant ridges where clouds were forming darker than before. "Flood comes this way," he said simply. Eliza blinked. "Flood? It hasn't rained here for days." "Not here," Tako replied. "In the mountains." A few men chuckled. One muttered, "He's guessing." Eliza crossed her arms. "You're too old for this," she said coldly. "You can't just make decisions based on instincts or memories. We deserve logic." Tako finally looked at her. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes flickered hurt or disappointment. She couldn't tell. "I guide," he said. "You follow." Then he turned his horse and continued left. The caravan hesitated, but slowly, wagon by wagon, they followed him, though reluctantly. Eliza rode at the back, fuming. muttering under her breath about stubborn men who refused to admit their limits. But miles ahead, Dakota lifted his face to the wind, inhaling deeply. He could smell it, feel it. The storm was coming, and soon everyone would understand why age was not a weakness, but the sharpest weapon a man could carry. The canyon trail cut between two long walls of rock, their edges jagged as if carved by ancient claws. The caravan moved slowly, wheels grinding over uneven ground. Though the air was dry, a strange heaviness pushed down from the sky, a promise of something gathering far beyond the visible horizon. Dakota rode ahead, silent and steady. But behind him frustration simmered like a pot ready to boil over. At the front of that boil was Eliza Carter. She tried to keep her composure, but irritation gnawed at her. Every bump of the wagon, every uneven turn of the path, every groaning complaint from the settlers behind her, she felt responsible for all of it, as if she'd personally allowed the caravan to be dragged into this unnecessary detour. And every time she looked toward the guide at the front, her temper spiked again. "He's leading us into a dead end," she muttered, her jaw tight. "All because he thinks his age makes him wise." Beside her rode Mrs. Hattie Miller, a middle-aged seamstress traveling to Santa Fe to join her son. Hattie had the patience of a saint, but even she looked uneasy. "He's been at this longer than any of us," Hattie offered gently. "Maybe he sees something we don't." Eliza scoffed. "He won't even explain himself properly. He just tells everyone to follow because he knows. That's not leadership, it's stubbornness wrapped in mystery." "Sometimes," Hattie said with a small smile, "mystery is earned." Eliza tried to let that settle her, but it didn't. Her frustration mounted until she couldn't stand it anymore. She urged her horse forward, slipping between wagons until she caught up to Dakota again. He acknowledged her presence with the faintest turn of his head, but said nothing. That only irritated her more. "Dakota," she snapped. "Stop." To her surprise, he did. He reined in his horse, shifted slightly, and waited. Behind them, wagon wheels creaked to a halt. The caravan quieted, a stillness settling over the group as people sensed conflict brewing. Eliza pulled her horse around to face him directly. She tried to look composed, firm, authoritative, but the journey's dust clung to her boots and her hair whipped wildly in the wind. She pointed toward the distant, smooth main trail they had abandoned. That path was safer, faster, clearer. "This canyon is slow and dangerous. Why drag us through here when the other way is easier?" Dakota's gaze drifted upward toward the sliver of sky visible between the canyon walls. The wind that brushed his cheek carried a faint scent: wet earth, sharp leaves, the early breath of a storm, because the easy road is not the safe road today. "That's not an answer," Eliza fired back. "You can't expect everyone to trust your instincts. People need explanations. They need logic." His eyes shifted down to her, calm, patient, and somehow that patience only fueled her anger. "You doubt me," he said simply. "Of course I doubt you." She burst out. "You're acting like you know everything because you've lived through a few storms. But age doesn't make you right." A few gasps rippled through the travelers behind them. Hattie covered her mouth. A young soldier whispered, "Ouch." Dakota's expression didn't change, but Eliza saw something flicker in his eyes, something she couldn't name. Not pain, not offense. Something heavier. Disappointment, perhaps. Or weariness. She suddenly wished she hadn't said it, but her pride wouldn't let her take it back. "You think I am too old," he said quietly. Not a question, just an acknowledgement of what she'd thrown at him. Eliza felt heat rise to her cheeks. Well, yes. I think you're using experience as an excuse to ignore reason. You're making decisions with no proof." A long silence stretched between them, thick as canyon air. Finally, Dakota nudged his horse forward, not toward her, but around her. As he passed, he spoke softly enough that only she could hear. "You want proof," he said. "Then you will have it." He trotted ahead, leaving her sitting rigid in her saddle. A storm inside her every bit as heavy as the one forming in the mountains. Behind them, the caravan resumed its slow crawl through the canyon. Following the older warrior they had doubted, Eliza watched Dakota's back. A knot forming in her stomach. She had wanted him to argue, to defend himself, to fight back, but his quiet certainty, the way he simply knew and settled her more than any confrontation might have done. As the first low rumble of thunder drifted across the canyon, Eliza wondered uncomfortably if she was about to find out just how wrong she had been. The caravan had barely pushed halfway through the canyon when the air shifted subtly at first, then unmistakably. The breeze that had whispered through the rock walls all morning stilled, replaced by a heavy silence that pressed on every surface. Even the horses seemed to sense it. Their ears flicked back, their steps growing hesitant. Dakota noticed everything. He noticed the way dust no longer rose from the ground because moisture clung to the air. He noticed how shadows sharpened, how the sky dimmed though the sun was still high. He noticed the faint tremor so distant the others wouldn't feel it, that shook through the rock beneath his horse's hooves. He glanced behind him. Eliza rode several wagons back, chewing her lip as she scanned the canyon walls with nervous eyes. Her earlier fire had dimmed, replaced by a tension she didn't understand. She would understand soon. Dakota raised his hand, signaling a halt. "Stop the wagons," he called, voice ringing firmly through the narrow passage. "Hold your positions." A few drivers obeyed immediately. Others muttered, confused, but slowed anyway. Then it happened. A deep, rolling boom echoed across the canyon, so loud, so sudden, the walls themselves seemed to vibrate. Several travelers cried out. A horse reared. Children clung to their mothers. Eliza jerked her head up. The sky above them had gone unnaturally dark, as if someone had thrown a heavy curtain across the sun. Then she heard it, the sound that changed everything. A rushing roar. Like thousands of pounding feet. Like wind made of water. Like a monster waking from sleep. Eliza's eyes widened. "What is that?" Dakota didn't hesitate. "Flash flood." The word tore through the caravan like a blade. "But the sky is clear." Someone shouted desperately. "Not in the mountains," Dakota said, already swinging off his horse. "It comes from above the ridge, fast." Panic erupted instantly. People scrambled from wagons. A man dropped his crate of supplies. A mother pulled her children close, terror etching her face. Eliza's pulse hammered so hard she felt it in her throat. She turned to see Dakota, climbing one of the canyon slopes with impossible speed for a man of his age. He wasn't running, he was moving with purpose, like a man who had done this dozens of times, a scout, a survivor. A man who knew the land better than anyone else alive. "Get to higher ground," Dakota commanded, pointing to a plateau halfway up the canyon wall. "Move." This time, no one questioned him. Drivers whipped their reins, urging the horses forward. Men and women grabbed children, packs, blankets, anything within reach, and stumbled toward safety. Eliza sprang from her saddle, grabbing Hattie's arm. "Come on, we can't stay down here." Together they hurried toward the plateau, but the trail up was narrow and clogged with panicked families. Behind them, the roar grew louder, angrier, closer. Eliza risked a look back. Her heart dropped. A wall of muddy, churning water thundered toward them, devouring the canyon floor. Debris, branches, rocks hurling through it like flailing limbs. They weren't going to make it. Not all of them. "Dakota!" she screamed, voice sharp with fear. Before she could blink, he was there, appearing beside her as if carved from the canyon itself. He grabbed her elbow firmly, pushing her ahead of him. "Climb," he said. "Don't stop." "But the others." "Climb." His tone allowed no argument. Eliza obeyed, scrambling up the slope as the first wave of water smashed into the canyon floor below, shaking the earth beneath her feet. Had he slipped? Eliza reached back, catching her wrist with trembling fingers. Dakota was already behind them, bracing his body and lifting both women upward with strength that defied every insult she'd ever thrown at him. Water crashed below, rising fast, chewing at the base of the slope like a beast trying to swallow them. Higher. Dakota urged. Eliza dragged herself onto the plateau, pulling Hattie with her. Moments later, Dakota climbed up behind them with the last of the stragglers, pushing them toward solid ground. Just as the flood reached the spot they'd been standing, the sound was deafening water slamming, rocks grinding, echoes booming like cannon fire. The entire caravan watched, breathless, as the flood raged beneath them, surging through the canyon they had traveled only minutes earlier. Eliza couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The truth struck her all at once, heavier than the storm itself. If Dakota hadn't led them through the canyon, if he hadn't stopped them when he did, if he hadn't known what the wind, the earth, the sky were telling him, every person on this journey would have been swept away. She slowly turned toward him. Dakota stood tall at the edge of the plateau, water crashing far below him, his silhouette outlined by the darkened sky. He wasn't panting. He wasn't shaken. He was steady, unbroken, strong. Eliza swallowed hard, the words she once threw at him echoing cruelly in her mind. "You're too old for this." But as she watched him calm, sure, watching over every terrified person he had just saved, she understood the truth. He was not too old. He was exactly the man they needed, exactly the man she had misjudged, and something inside her shifted quietly, deeply, irrevocably. The flood had passed, leaving the canyon floor scarred and chaotic. Trees were uprooted, boulders shifted, and mud had carved new paths where wagons had once rolled. The caravan huddled atop the plateau Dakota had guided them to, catching their breath and checking for injuries. Relief and awe rippled through the travelers. They had survived because of him. Eliza Carter, however, didn't feel relief so much as something else, a gnawing mixture of embarrassment, curiosity, and something dangerously close to admiration. She watched Dakota from across the plateau. Even now he moved quietly among the weary families, checking children, helping a man balance a wagon wheel that had come loose. He didn't call attention to himself, but every movement carried an air of authority that couldn't be ignored. The silver streaks in his hair caught the dying sunlight, lending him an almost untouchable aura. Eliza shifted her weight on the rocky ground, trying to act indifferent, but she couldn't stop herself from studying him. He was older, yes, but the strength in his arms, the grace in his movements, the unwavering calm in his gaze, it all contradicted the words she had thrown at him hours earlier. Too old. How small those words now seemed. The moment stretched, silent except for the murmurs of the caravan and the occasional clink of wagon repairs. Dakota paused briefly to check a family's supplies, then turned and without a word began helping Eliza's wagon. "What are you doing?" she asked, stepping forward, a flush creeping up her neck. She hadn't realized how tense she'd been until now. "Helping your wagon," he said simply. His voice was steady, measured, the calm in it almost disarming. "It's stuck on the slope. It will fall if we leave it unattended." Eliza's fingers fumbled at the ropes. "I can manage." "No," he interrupted gently. "We do this together." She felt herself pause, uncharacteristically uncertain. Dakota's eyes didn't waver. They simply held hers for a moment, an unspoken patience that made it impossible to argue. She bit back a retort and followed his lead. adjusting the ropes and guiding the wagon carefully as they worked side by side. Eliza noticed details she hadn't before: the strength in his hands, roughened but precise. The slow, deliberate way he moved, like every action had been honed over decades. And the faint scars across his forearms, subtle evidence of a life that had demanded resilience. "You make this look easy," she admitted. A little breathless, not from the work, but from the nearness of him. Dakota glanced at her. "Experience," he said. Then, almost softly, "not age." The words struck her more than she expected. She remembered the sharp accusation she had made earlier, the harshness of her judgment. Too old for this. She had meant it as a cutting remark, a way to assert her own authority and intellect. But now, seeing him in action, she felt it dissolve into foolishness. There was a quiet rhythm to their movements, a kind of unspoken harmony as they adjusted ropes, shifted wagon wheels, and secured supplies. She caught herself glancing at him more than once, noticing the way his eyes softened when speaking to children, or how his voice, low and steady, calmed even the most anxious travelers. When the wagon was finally secure, Dakota stepped back, surveying their work with a critical but approving eye. "Safe," he said. Eliza nodded, feeling an unexpected weight lift from her shoulders. She realized she had been carrying more than fatigue from the journey. She had been carrying doubt, skepticism, and pride. And he had quietly, firmly, without argument, dismantled every bit of it. For a long moment, neither spoke. The canyon was calm again, the echoes of the flood replaced by the distant caw of a hawk circling overhead. Eliza could feel the tension between them, a mix of curiosity, respect, and something she didn't quite name. Finally, she dared to speak, voice almost a whisper. I misjudged you." Dakota's gaze met hers, unwavering. "Judgment comes with understanding," he said simply. "Patience often leads to it." Eliza's lips parted, but no words came. She felt the canyon between them shrink, not physically, but in the realization that everything she had thought she knew about him, about age and strength and capability, was wrong. And as the sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow over the plateau, she understood that this man, older, experienced, calm, and undeniably strong, was not only a protector to the caravan, but someone who might, in ways she hadn't yet imagined, challenge everything she thought about herself. The canyon held them in silence, and for the first time, Eliza didn't feel the need to argue. She simply watched, and in the quiet, the distance between doubt and admiration. Night fell quickly in the canyon, darkness spilling over the plateau like a velvet blanket. The survivors of the flood huddled around small fires, tending to frightened children, damp blankets, and weary animals. The stars shone faintly above, though the clouds from the earlier storm still lingered on the horizon, jagged and threatening. Dakota had moved quietly among the families, helping where needed, ensuring everyone was as safe as possible. His presence was steady, a calm anchor in a sea of exhaustion. Eliza watched him from a few steps away, wrapped in her shawl, heart still racing from the day's chaos. She had spent hours thinking she knew what courage looked like, but now she realized that true courage was quiet, unassuming, and unwavering. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden noise, soft, deliberate, almost imperceptible, but Dakota heard it immediately. His hand shot toward the hilt of his knife, his body tensing like a coiled spring. "Eliza," he murmured, his voice low and commanding, "stay close. Don't move." Her pulse jumped. Before she could ask what he meant, the canyon erupted with a flash of torches and shouted commands. A small band of raiders, taking advantage of the night, attempted to plunder the stranded caravan. Panic swept through the camp as children cried, horses neighed, and men scrambled for weapons. Dakota didn't hesitate. He moved with astonishing speed, despite the years etched into his face and muscles. He intercepted the raiders before they could reach the most vulnerable families, blocking their path with calculated precision. Each move was deliberate, each step measured, as if he had anticipated every strike before it happened. Eliza watched in awe. He was older, she could see the lines in his face, the silver in his hair, but he fought like a man half his age, faster than she could follow. He deflected a blow aimed at a young boy, grabbed the man by the wrist, and sent him tumbling into the shadows. Another raider lunged toward the supplies, only to be met with a swift, controlled motion that disarmed him without unnecessary force. "Stay behind me," Dakota commanded as he guided frightened travelers toward the center of the camp. His eyes met hers for the briefest moment, steady, unflinching, reassuring. She obeyed instinctively, feeling the weight of safety and strength that radiated from him. Minutes passed like hours, but under Dakota's leadership, the attack was contained. The raiders, realizing the caravan was well defended and coordinated, began to retreat, disappearing back into the canyon shadows from which they had emerged. When the echoes of the confrontation faded, Eliza's legs trembled as adrenaline ebbed. She looked around. The caravan was intact, families were unharmed, and the threat had passed. And there, at the center of the plateau, stood Dakota. He was breathing steadily, his body firm, his eyes calm, almost serene despite the chaos. Eliza approached him cautiously, still processing what she had witnessed. How are you still standing?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. He shrugged slightly, brushing dirt from his sleeve. "Because I must. Because I've faced worse, and because giving in doesn't save anyone." His words resonated with her more than she expected. She realized that all her doubts, all her judgments about age and strength had been hollow. He had proven, in the most undeniable way, that experience, patience, and determination were as powerful, if not more so, than youth and speed. Eliza felt an unfamiliar warmth, rising within her, a mix of admiration, respect, and something deeper, more personal. She had always prided herself on her keen judgment and sharp tongue, but here was a man who had shattered every preconception she held. For the first time, she spoke softly, honestly. I never believed in you before. But now, I can't imagine anyone else leading us through this." Dakota looked at her, and for the first time that night, his lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "Belief is earned," he said simply. "And sometimes it comes too late for words, but never for action." The firelight flickered across his face, highlighting the strength and wisdom carved into every line. Eliza's chest tightened as she realized she wasn't just witnessing bravery, she was witnessing a man who had lived, learned, and endured, and who had just saved them all through sheer force of experience and will. She could feel a shift within herself, an acknowledgement that this man, older, seasoned, and perhaps considered past his prime, was more alive, more capable, and more remarkable than anyone she had ever known. And as the canyon settled into uneasy quiet once more, Eliza's thoughts returned reluctantly to the words she had once said in anger. "You're too old for this." She knew now they had been wrong. Utterly, completely wrong. The night had settled over the canyon like a heavy quilt, the air still carrying the faint scent of wet earth and charred wood from the day's struggles. The caravan huddled around small, sputtering fires, the survivors exhausted but alive. Children slept clinging to their mothers. Wagons leaned against rocks for support, and the weary animals nuzzled one another for warmth. Eliza Carter remained by one of the smaller fires, her shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. She tried to keep her thoughts focused on the practical, checking that everyone had blankets, that food and water were distributed, but she kept stealing glances at Dakota. He had retreated a short distance away, helping Hattie settle her children and ensuring the horses were secure. Even in the dim firelight, his presence was magnetic, commanding attention without demanding it. Her mind replayed the events of the day, the flood, the chaos, and the raiders. She had watched him work with a calm precision that defied words. Every decision he had made, every action he had taken, had been perfect. And yet, he hadn't boasted or argued. He had simply been. Eventually, she found herself rising quietly, drawn by something she couldn't quite name. She approached him cautiously, unsure of how to speak without betraying the storm of emotions inside her. "Dakota," she said softly. He turned, his eyes reflecting the firelight, calm and steady. "Eliza," he acknowledged, nodding slightly. "You're awake late. I couldn't sleep," she admitted. "After today, after everything, I keep thinking." She hesitated, searching for words that could explain the mixture of fear, relief, and something else, something unfamiliar and unsettling. He tilted his head, listening. He had a way of making people feel seen, of making even the unspoken weight of their thoughts tangible. "Thinking is not a bad thing," he said quietly. I misjudged you," she confessed, finally meeting his gaze. "I judged you because of your age. I assumed that experience couldn't outweigh youth, that strength had a cutoff. I was wrong." Dakota's expression softened, but he said nothing, simply letting her words hang in the air. His silence was not judgmental. It was patient, giving her the space to continue. "I watched you today," she continued, voice shaking slightly. "I watched you lead us, protect us, save lives when chaos struck. You didn't hesitate. You didn't falter. And I realized," she swallowed hard, "I realized I've been blind. Age isn't weakness. You are everything I thought I knew, and more." For the first time, Dakota's lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. He stepped closer, not imposing, not demanding, but moving with quiet certainty. "Understanding often comes too late for words," he said softly. "But it is never too late for truth." Eliza felt a shiver run through her, a combination of chill night air and the heat of his gaze. She had always believed herself strong, independent, able to judge character quickly. Yet here she was, admitting to a man older than herself in the flickering firelight that she had underestimated him, that she had been wrong. I don't just respect you," she whispered, voice low, almost afraid to say it aloud. I admire you, more than I've ever admired anyone." Dakota's eyes softened, and he reached out, not touching her, but closing the distance between them enough that their presence was shared. "Admiration is the seed of understanding," he said. "And understanding can lead to things far greater than pride or prejudice." Eliza's heart pounded. She realized she was trembling not from the chill, but from the weight of what she was feeling. Fear, respect, awe, and something tender, nascent, stirring inside her. A connection she hadn't anticipated, and one she couldn't ignore. They stood beside the fire in silence, watching the flames dance, listening to the canyon's nighttime sounds, the distant calls of owls, the soft rustle of leaves, the quiet breathing of the caravan around them. And in that silence, unspoken but profoundly felt, Eliza sensed the shift in herself. She no longer viewed Dakota as merely an older man who might be past his prime. She saw him as a force of life and strength, capable of protecting, teaching, and perhaps loving. The night deepened, and still they remained close, sharing the quiet between them, the trust, the acknowledgement of each other's presence. In the firelight, the gap between doubt and admiration had narrowed completely, leaving only something fragile, powerful, and entirely new dot, and for the first time since the journey began, Eliza allowed herself to wonder what might come next, not just for the caravan, not just for survival, but for her and Dakota, and the uncharted path they might travel together. The dawn sky was streaked with crimson and gold, painting the canyon walls in an almost surreal glow. The caravan, though battered from the flood and previous night's attack, had managed to regroup. Horses pawed the ground, wagons creaked under supplies, and the travelers, still shaken but alive, prepared to resume their journey. Eliza rode near the rear, keeping a watchful eye on the group. She had spent the night replaying every detail of Dakota's actions, how he had moved with unerring precision, how he had anticipated danger before it struck, how he had saved not only lives but their spirits. She still found herself stealing glances at him as he walked along the front of the caravan, scanning the horizon with the same calm intensity she had seen the night before. A distant rustle caught his attention. He paused, ears attuned, and raised a hand to halt the caravan. "Eliza," he said, his voice low but firm, "stay close. They're coming." Before she could ask who, the first raiders appeared along a ridge, moving with stealth and intent, their eyes on the caravan as if they were predators circling prey. The men and women of the caravan froze, fear flickering across their faces. Some of the younger travelers reached for weapons, others whispered prayers. But Dakota remained composed, every muscle in his body alert, every movement measured. "Form a line," he commanded. "Keep the families behind you. No one panics. Watch me." Eliza followed instinctively, heart pounding. She realized how quickly her respect had deepened into trust-blind trust, but not foolish. She felt safer with him than she ever had with anyone else in her life. The raiders charged. Dakota moved first, intercepting the attackers with skill and speed that belied his age. His hands and arms were strong and precise, every motion deliberate. He deflected blows, disarmed aggressors, and positioned himself between the raiders and the caravan. Eliza's pulse raced as she followed his instructions, helping to guide frightened travelers behind the wagon line. She felt his presence beside her as if a shield existed in the space around him, unseen but unbreakable. One raider lunged toward a child hiding near a wagon wheel. Dakota stepped in, catching the man's arm, twisting it expertly, and sending him sprawling into the dirt. Another attacker aimed at a woman carrying supplies. Dakota's movement was like water, fluid and unstoppable, redirecting the raider away with minimal force. The battle lasted only minutes, but to Eliza it felt like hours. The older Apache warrior had become a whirlwind of calm power, moving with a rhythm and foresight that none of the younger men could match. Every time she thought he might falter, he adjusted, countered, and protected, never once showing fatigue. Finally, the remaining raiders realized they were outmatched and began to retreat. Dakota didn't pursue them. He simply ensured the caravan was secure before signaling the all-clear. Eliza's legs shook. As she lowered herself from her horse, she couldn't find words, couldn't speak without her throat tightening. The reality of what she had just witnessed, the older man, whom she had once derided as too old for this, had saved every person in the caravan once more. She approached him, heart still hammering. I don't even know what to say," she admitted. You've done it again." Dakota looked at her, calm, unshaken. "I told you would see," he said simply. "Age is not weakness. Experience, understanding, patience. These are the tools we use to survive, to protect, to endure." Eliza swallowed hard. She wanted to argue, to protest, to hide the emotions bubbling inside her, but she couldn't. She realized she had already changed. Her pride and doubt had melted away, replaced with admiration, trust, and something tender that she didn't yet dare name. "Dakota," she whispered, voice barely audible. I was wrong. Completely wrong about you." He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable but gentle. Then, slowly, a small, almost imperceptible smile appeared. "Belief is often tested before it is earned," he said. "And you? You have seen it now." Eliza nodded, feeling a strange mixture of relief and awe. She had not only survived because of him, but she had learned something far more profound: courage. Strength and wisdom were not bound by age. And admiration could grow in the unlikeliest of places. As the canyon fell silent again, the sun climbing higher, Eliza understood that this day had changed everything, not just for the caravan, but for her. The man she had doubted had proven not only his strength, but the depth of his character. And for the first time, she allowed herself to wonder if she could trust him with more than just survival with herself. The canyon had settled into a calm, almost sacred stillness. The flood was a memory now, the raiders defeated, and the caravan intact. The survivors moved with careful steps, tending to animals, repairing wagons, and exchanging quiet words of relief. Yet amidst the recovery, Eliza Carter felt a different kind of quiet stirring inside her, a recognition that this journey had changed more than just the landscape. It had changed her. Dakota stood near the edge of the plateau, surveying the horizon with the same unwavering calm he had displayed since the journey began. The sun warmed his face, highlighting the silver streaks in his hair and the lines that spoke of years lived with resilience and purpose. He radiated a quiet strength, not loud or boastful, but unmistakable in its presence. Eliza approached him slowly, her heart hammering. She had spent the past 2 days in awe of him, in fear and admiration, in doubt and revelation. But now, standing so close, she felt a shift of vulnerability she hadn't allowed herself to experience before. "Dakota," she began softly, voice catching, I need to say something." He turned his gaze toward her, steady and patient. "I am listening," he said. She drew a deep breath, the canyon air filling her lungs as if giving her courage. "I misjudged you," she confessed, the words finally spilling out. "I said things I didn't mean. I doubted your strength, your wisdom, your heart. I thought your age was a limitation, a weakness. But I was wrong. You've proven, again and again, that experience is strength, that patience is power, and that courage, real courage, doesn't come with youth. It comes from living, enduring, and caring for others." Dakota studied her silently, a faint warmth in his eyes. Then, slowly, he stepped closer. "You have learned," he said, his voice gentle. "And that is all I have ever asked." Eliza's lips parted, and she felt her cheeks flush. "No," she said, her voice firmer now, "it's more than that. I admire you. I respect you. I trust you. With my life and perhaps with more." Dakota's expression softened, and a small, rare smile curved his lips. He reached out not to take, but to offer presence and reassurance. "Then let us walk this path together," he said quietly. "Not because of fear or necessity, but because choice is stronger than circumstance." Eliza's heart skipped. She realized that she had been guarding herself all her life against disappointment, loss, and misjudgment. But in the face of this man, standing tall, calm, and undeniably capable, she felt the walls around her heart begin to crumble. "Choice," she repeated, letting the word linger. She nodded, the tension in her chest easing. "Yes." "Together." Dakota extended a hand, not commanding, not demanding, but inviting. Eliza took it, and for the first time, she felt a connection that was both grounding and electrifying. His hand was strong, steady, and unyielding, an anchor in the aftermath of chaos. They stood together, watching the canyon stretch out before them, the journey behind them marked with trials. and the path ahead uncertain but promising. Around them, the survivors of the caravan were slowly moving forward, carrying their belongings and each other, guided by the example of the older Apache warrior who had defied every expectation. Eliza glanced at Dakota, her eyes softening. "I don't know what tomorrow will bring," she admitted, "but I know this: I don't want to face it without you." Dakota's smile widened, faint but genuine. "Then we will face it together," he replied. "Every step, every challenge, every storm." For the first time, Eliza felt a sense of peace, not the fragile kind that comes from avoiding danger, but the profound kind that comes from trust, respect, and mutual recognition. She had thought him too old, too past his prime, and capable of leading, protecting, or inspiring. But he had shown her that age was not a limitation, it was a measure of endurance, a depth of experience that few could comprehend. And as the sun dipped lower, casting long golden shadows over the canyon floor, Eliza reached for Dakota's hand again, feeling the steady warmth of it, the strength behind it, and the quiet promise of everything yet to come. For once, she did not doubt. She did not argue. She did not hold back. She simply trusted Dot, and in that trust, something new and unspoken blossomed, a connection born of danger survived, respect earned, and hearts open to possibilities neither had expected. The canyon echoed with silence, relief, and hope. As Eliza finally allowed herself to acknowledge the truth, Dakota was not just a protector, not just a guide. He was the man she had been wrong about, and the man she could no longer imagine living without.